Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Gitin Daf. Hey, you begin on the bottom of Daf Dalma Beis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid. But the Gemara continues in this famous machlekes Rabba and Rava regarding this opening halacha of our parak, our Masechta. How maybe get Medina's Yam. Someone brings his get from overseas. What's the reason? Is it because of, like Rabba says, they're not bekin lishma, or because, like Rabba says, ain't mitzvah l'kaimai? So that's the Gemara continues to ask on their opinions regarding how. If that's the correct interpretation based on the halachas of our Mishnah is or not. Just corresponds by Kazakh and Chesko to Daf. I'm doing today's Daf. So discussing today's Daf is some interesting twists in this opinion of Rabbah, which the Gemara continues to ask on. The Gemara keeps on amending his teaching, and one of the concepts is la'achar shalamdu, that he tells us, oh yes, they didn't know lishma, but certain halachas were said after they ended up learning the halacha of lishma, then the halacha was different. So there's this concept of they ended up learning it. And there's another related idea, but shemiyach zedebel kukulai. So even though they learned the halacha, then why would we then say b'fanei nechtav at all? Because we're concerned that it might go back to its state when people did not know it, or like Tay says, they didn't accept it. So we continue to require b'fanei nechtav because they might go back to that state. Some of the other ideas is b'fnei kamanoisna law, the machlekes regarding how many people do you have to give the get in front of when you're the shliach lehalach, when you bring it, which relates to the machlekes of shliach nasa eid ve'ein nasa dain. Do we say that the agent could become a witness, and then as a witness become a judge, so then essentially the shliach who brings it could ultimately be one of the three judges to verify the get? The concept of Mishan and Rebbeir holds that if you change from the text of the sages, it doesn't work at all, and the child's going to be a mamzer. And the daf ends with the shiur of lishma. How much of the ksiva of the get did you have to see to say that you could say b'fanei nechtav to verify that it was done lishma? To begin the current daf, as we said, the opening halacha of our Masechta was if you bring a get from Medina's Yam, you have to say b'fanei nechtav. Rabbi said because to ensure that it was written lishma, and according to Rava is to authenticate the signatures. So now the Gemara asks on Daf Dalam Beis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Amid, asks on Rabbah from Tanan. We learned the Mishnah Daf Tes and Aleph. On the previous Daf, when we asked from our Mishnah, we're moving on to the next Mishnah Daf Tes. The Mishnah says that maybe get Medina Siyam, if someone brings a get from overseas, ve'enu yochel loimer, and he cannot say, and the Gemara is going to explain what does this mean he cannot say, but he can't say b'fanei nechtav b'fanei nechtav. Okay, he can't that it was written in front of me and signed in front of me. Says the Mishnah, okay, what do you do? If there are witnesses on the get, yiskayim b'cheisamav. So you validate it with the signatures. In other words, those who recognize the signature come along, and they say, we recognize it, and you validate the get that way. Now, Vavinim, but we had asked on that mission of Tess, what does that mean that this guy can't say b'fanei nechtav? What does it mean he can't say? As we continue to have Peyam and Aleph. If you think to say it means someone who's a deaf mute, what? Cheresh barisu Gitin? What do you mean he can't say? Because like Tesa says, we didn't want to say a case of like someone who's mute, or that he just didn't see the writing of the get, and therefore he can't say because he didn't see it. Because then it should have said v'lo omar. What's this that ve'enu yochel loimer? It sounds like not that he didn't say, he can't say. What he can't say? Because he's a cheresh, he's deaf mute, so he doesn't have the ability to say at all. Wait a second, how could that be the case of that? Okay, if he can't say, then we'll be mekayim with b'chesamav. But cheresh ba'isui gitu, you think he could even bring the get? He can't even be a shliach to bring it in the first place to say that, if he can't say, then we'll validate some other way, because but none. In the Mishnah of Chav Gimel it says, Hakol kshem lehebias a get, everyone is kosher, is valid to bring the get. Chutz, micheresh, a deaf mute, shaita, someone mentally deranged, but caught in the minor. And the reason for that is because they don't have intelligence, and they can't be an agent for the gerushin, for the divorce, as the Gemara says in Kedushin of Ben Bezim and Aleph, a minor cannot become a shliach, and the same thing all these others, because they don't have das. So what's the case talking about? So Rabbi Yisrael says, you know what the case is talking about? We're talking about is, right. The only way he was able to be a shliach in the first place, to be an agent, was he gave it to her when he was totally sane. He was competent, so he was a kosher shliach. But he didn't get a chance to say. In front of me was written, in front of me was signed, until he became a deaf mute. So in those few moments, which actually Taisus learns from there, that you see that it doesn't have to be the moment that you give it the actual statement of b'fanei nechtav. It could be terkei dibur, but he didn't get a chance to say it, and boom, he becomes a deaf mute. Okay, so he's a good shliach, but he can't say it. Fine, that's the case. But says the Gemara, wait a second. L'Rava nichel Rabba kasha. According to Rava, it makes sense. because no problem. The whole point of Vani Nechtav was we don't want to require you to have to be Mekayim B'chasamav because it's hard to get witnesses. But according to Rabbi, that's difficult because how could you say he's Mekayim B'chasamav? But what does that help? So he authenticated the document. The witnesses were not false witnesses. It wasn't forged. How do we know they did it Lishma? According to Rabbi, the whole that it's for Kim Lishma. So the Gemara says a very important concept that it adds on. You know what we're talking about over here in this Mishnah? Is la'achar shalamdu. After they learned that it needs to be done, lishma, so they know the halacha. The Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, they tell me they already learned this halacha. So then yochel nami, even someone who could say b'fanei nechtav, should not require it. In other words, if it's possible to verify with the witnesses, because as we said on the previous daf, Rabba holds like Rava. We said Rabba Islay the Rabba, he also requires kima chasamam. But then you shouldn't require b'fanei nechtav at all. Why you tell me this whole case if you can't say because he became a chedish right after? What does that do anything? They learned the halacha. You don't need b'fanei nechtav anymore. Just become the chasamam. As Taisa explains what the question is specifically on Rabba, not on Rava, but the Gemara answers that no, even though they learned the halacha already, Rabbanu would not ikr their takana because it's a gezerah. So there's like another piece over here regarding this halacha. It's a gezerah shemiyachzeh double kakulei. We're concerned that things might go back to the old ways as they were messed up, that people forget this halacha. So therefore now also the shliach, we check him to make sure that it was done lishma, meaning even though now they do know lishma, but since it might go back, we still require b'fanei nechtav. So they must wait a second. If that's the case, so what's his double standard? In Yochanami. So then a guy who can't, I don't care, but you told me you require b'fanei nechtav. How does that help that he can't? But you told me you require it. So it doesn't work rabbinically. However you want to translate the halacha, what's the difference if it's in Yochel? No, it says the Gemara, interesting answer. The Gemara says, Pikech v'nischadish, the case that we described, that what's the case of in Yochel, is when he was mentally competent, and then he became a deaf mute, is a misl shlicha. It's definitely not common to have that way, because again, he has to be pikech, because it's not a shliach in the first place. So the only way he could be a shliach is he was pikech, he became, a moment after he gave it, he became a chedesh. Well, that's not common. Misl shlicha legazer barabana. Yeah, I'm saying it definitely could happen. Yeah, it could happen, but it's not really like after this whole journey that he came, and the moment he gave it is that kicked in. So since it's not common, and yeah, it must be common enough that we must be talking about a case like that, but it's not that common. The Rabbanan were not geyser, and since it's only gzeir the Rabbanan of shemiyach zebekukuloi, there we were not geyser, and therefore that's why it's okay without b'fanai nechtav. So therefore it's not difficult on Rabbah because we introduced this new idea of la'achar shalamdu and shemiyach zebekukuloi. The Gemara, however, continues to ask. It says, wait a second. Va'isha, what do you do with the case of a woman? D'loi shchicha, it's not common that the woman herself should have to bring her get, meaning through the medium of an agency, that the husband tells her, look, honey, I'm giving you the get, but you're not divorced until you reach to that bezin over there. And there, I want it to happen over there in front of that court. It's not common. Yet now we learn the Mishnah of Gimel and Beis that says, Ha'isha atzma mebiya gita, the woman herself, she brings her get, as long as she says b'fanei nechtav, which in the second parak on the Daf Dalman Alf, the Gemara asks, says, what does that mean? How could that, when the moment the woman gets it, v'nasim b'yada, the moment it comes to her hand, she's divorced. So what does that mean that she has to say b'fanei nechtav? Only then that court should be divorced. The Gemara answers, it's where he tells her, I want you to bring it to that court as a shlichus. But one thing is, you see in the Mishnah on Daf Gimel that the woman herself has to say b'fanei nechtav. Well, that's a mitzvah shchicha. Didn't you tell me it's la'achar shalamdu? Everyone knows the halacha already. So why do we require b'fanei nechtav? Oh, shemiyach zedavak kulay. It might go back. So why eni yachol, a guy who can't pikech v'neschadish? He said, oh, because mitzvah shchicha. A woman's also mitzvah shchicha. So why are you requiring her to say b'fanei nechtav v'nechtam? So the Gemara says another interesting answer. Shlei tachlik b'shlichas. The Chachamim didn't want to differentiate between different types of agencies of one type of shlich and another one. Meaning, as Rashi explains, this by the guy, it's a little bit different the way Rashi says, the way Taisa says it, but this is the guy who cannot say it. That's not a chiluk that we're making, because really we would require him to say it. It's just, he can't because he became a chedesh. Now, since it's Musal Shchicha, the Rabban will not goyiz of Shavayachas of a kukuli to require b'fani nechtam in such a case. Now, really, the woman also we wouldn't, because it's milsle shchicha. But we didn't want to be machalik regarding shlichais, so therefore we required even a lo shchicha shliach to say b'fani nechtam, which would include the woman too. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, I have another question. Bal nami. So then the husband also should also require for himself to say b'fani nechtam, meaning when he is bringing it himself. Allah matan why in the brisa that says who if the husband himself brings his get, which he had written in overseas, and he's coming over here to divorce her, why does the brisa say in tzarich laima b'fani nechtam? It doesn't have to say in front of me, it was written in front of me, was signed. Why not? If he's a shliach himself, he should also have to say b'fani nechtam, even though maybe that's not common. But why is he not like a shliach in that same idea too? Just like the woman, it's like a regular get, but I don't want it to happen until there. He should also have to say and verify that it was written in front of him and it was signed in front of him, that he knows it was written lishma. Says Gemara, no. Why did the rabbi say that every single shliach, when he comes and brings it, has to say, so it's interesting, the way Rashi says and the way Taisu was saying all throughout the sugyas, it's really a concern, even if you hold it's because of lishma. The way Taisu says it is that Taisu says all along we knew it's mostly going to be lishma, and we really know it's lishma because stam safar the dynamic memiri and most people know lishma. It's only that we're concerned that the husband might be contesting and say, "Oh, I didn't know," and he's going to start spreading rumors. So says the Gemara that the whole reason is dilma asibah ma'ara pasalei. It's really, we're not really concerned for lishma. We're really concerned the husband might come to contest and invalidate it. He might say, "Oh, I don't know. I didn't know it was lishma." This and that. So, oh, the Rav said he didn't know. Okay, it's not good. He's holding it in his own hand, and he's going to contest it. In other words, like Taisa says, the whole point is only concerned about laws, about rumors, and we're not concerned that he's going to make rumors when he himself is bringing with his own hands. If he sends someone else, even though we're not really concerned, usually it's going to cause the woman to want to deliberately stumble. But if he himself is bringing it, we're not concerned that he's going to start contesting and say that I didn't know, and then maybe it wasn't done lishma. That's what says the Gemara, why he himself, because the whole point of b'fani nechtam really is not just to verify the lishma, it's also because we're concerned the husband might contest that it wasn't done lishma. But if he himself is bringing it, there's no reason to say b'fani nechtam, because he's not going to contest that, and therefore we don't require him to say, even though we would require the case of the woman, shlei tachlik b'shlichus. The Gemara says, Tashema, let's bring a raya, again, not like Rabbah. Why? Because the boy minei Shmuel Rav Huna. Shmuel asked from Rav Huna the following case. Shnaim sheviu get. If you have two people that bring a get, meaning they were both made to be agents to bring this get from Medina Zayam from overseas, so the halacha is shichin shiur b'faneinu nechtam b'faneinu nechtam. They have to say in front of us it was written, and in front of us it was signed. Or maybe they don't have to. In other words, that was the question. When two people bring it, do you have to say or not? Amalei said to him, you don't have to say. Why not? Because if these two guys would say, in front of us, she was divorced, Mila Mehemni, wouldn't they be believing? In other words, like Rashi explains, if they wanted to, they could say, we could testify that she was divorced, and they could give her the get or to her agent the get. In other words, they're two witnesses. So why would you need to say, they could just say that we're the witnesses for that. So on that says, the Gemara, let's l'Rava nicha. That makes sense according to Rava that the whole point of b'fani nechtav is because of kiyum shtachas of to verify. And you have two witnesses, so why do they have to say anything of b'faneinu nechtav? But the Rabba Kash, according to Rava, is difficult because he holds when two people bring it, you have to say b'fanei nechtav. And that was actually one of the cases that we had said previously. That's from the differences between Rabba and Rava. So why would you not have to say b'fanei nechtav? That doesn't help for lishma. Says the Gemara here also, what we're talking about is la'achar shalamdu. This case of this Amiram was after that they already learned the halacha and they already know lishma. So Rabbah is concerned for Rabbah's concern also, like we said in the previous tab. So it's only for Kim Shtar. So yeah, you wouldn't have to say it. Yehochi says, Gemara, wait a second, if they learned the halacha, the chadnami, then even when one guy brings it, you should also not require, when you have edim that are common, by edim etzuin l'kaimoi, you should not require anyone to say b'fanei nechtav.
Why are we coming on to that? Because by Surus, woman needs to keep a silver to continue to stay with her husband. And why? Because unlike karka, which is evident, the person has kinyan or karka, you can see it. By Gitin, a woman has no proof, and Aedis could be forgotten about. So her star is her get. Without a get, I mean, if you just were basing Gitin on Aedis, then it would be forgotten about. She needs a star. So why are you coming on to the fact that waiting should be good enough?
To aid them to verify the get. Yeah, she has a get. Well, why do you need to?
The Gemara is not talking about that she should.
No, it's not that you just have. You have a get, but if we have these two guys who are bringing the get, they could authenticate it, they could verify it. And why do you need them to say b'fanei nechtam? Why you don't have to say that text? That text is only when you don't have two people. You have two people. What's the point of that? So that's good according to Rav, but not according to Rabbah. So the Gemara says, we're talking about that they already learned the halacha of the Shema. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, and even one guy also, when he brings it, it is Eidim to the Kaimoi. Why would you have to have this guy say b'fanei nechtam? Also says the Gemara, same thing we said before, because it's a gzeira. It's a rabbinic concern when one guy brings it. You might go back to the old ways of not knowing the halacha of the Shema. So therefore, we will always require b'fanei nechtam. So they might wait. If that's the case, then beitrei nami. Then when even two guys bring it, they also, what does that have to do with Lishma? You should still have to say b'fanei nechtam because they might not remember the halacha of Lishma. Says the Gemara, same type of answer we said before. No, beitrei the ma'aseh gita. Two people bring a get. Misla shlicha is not common because why would you pay for two shlichim if you have one guy doing the job? And misla shlicha because of rabbanan. Since it's not common, so the rabbanan not goizu the gezeira of shemiach b'kuloi when two people bring it. So the Gemara asked the same line of questioning we mentioned before. Wait a second. But the woman which is not common for her to bring her own get as a shliach. But now we learned in the Mishnah Isha Atzma maybe a gita. The woman herself could bring her get as a shliach. As long as she says but if you tell me that it's when it's not shliach, then you're not geyser. So why would she have to say? So the Gemara answers, as we said before, we don't want to differentiate regarding agency. In other words, like Taish explains, by the shlichas of an individual, because we were geyser of one which is not sheikh, the woman, up to when you have one person bring which is shliach, which is a regular shliach. But by two people, because of one person, that we're not geyser, because that's fundamentally different. So we wouldn't come to confuse those cases. So shleitachlik would only be by one person, which would be by the woman, not when two people bring it. But says the Gemara, like we mentioned before, if that's the case, Bal Nami, send the husband to Alam, Atanya, why do we learn the Braisa, who Atzma, himself brings his get in the Tzarchlam, but he doesn't have to say B'vanechtem. Why not? Why don't you say Shleitachel B'shlichas? Says the Gemara, no time. Why do you have to say the whole idea of B'fanei nechtam? Is Demas Bal Ma'ar Apostle because maybe the husband's going to come along and contest and invalidate it? Meaning he'll say it wasn't done Lishma. Hashta make a knuckle. Now he's holding it in his hand. He's bringing it himself. But you think he's going to contest, and therefore it's not difficult. So okay, that answers that question on Rabbah. Now we continue to ask on Rabbah Toshma now from a Braisa. But I'm saying, it is a gezeira because it's not applicable really right now. They know the halacha lishma. It's a shem kukuloi. Maybe they're going to go back to their old ways. So in such a thing, we're not going to make the gezeira of shemiyach kukuloi because by a milzah shchicha. But it's a gezeira. You're right. It is our chaka. It's because we're concerned of something that might happen.
What's the case they didn't write?
That it wasn't written lishma. Oh, they wrote a generic text. They wrote it for either someone else and she found it in the garbage, or they wrote it for not for that woman herself. So the Gemara says, okay, Tashma Tzmigrai, not like Rabbah from the following Braisa. The Braisa says, Hamevi get Medina Sayam. Somebody brings a get from overseas. Unasanala. And he gives it up. He didn't say the magic words. So says the Braisa, if you validate it with these signatures, kasha, it's kasha. If not, pasa can be pasa. Now, says the Braisa the following words, and Heve, in other words, from now, you see, this that we required it, wasn't to be stringent on her, because you see that if you're Mekayim it, you don't require to do b'fan nachtam. It's not like when you're even going to be Mekayim, you'll still require it. No, it's ilahakalau. It's only to be lenient on her, meaning that we don't require to have two witnesses to come and verify it. That's what we did b'fan nachtam. That's what the Braisa says. So says the Gemara, that's l'Rava nichal l'Rabba kasha. That only works for Rava, not for Rabba. According to Rava, it makes sense why if you didn't say before the nechtav, it's going to work because it's only for kim chasamav. According to Rava, that's difficult. Wait a minute, it's not the whole reason before the nechtav, it's for lishma. And why would it work if you have kim chasamav? Says Gemara, okay, same type of answer. Where they already learned, they know the halacha, so it's no concern in the lishma. Says Gemara, wait a second. But Ahmed, you said in the brisa, and you said previously the concern of gzeir shem yachzor b'kolkulai. You said that even after they learned the halacha, that you're requiring b'fanei nechtav because of they might go back to their old ways. So why is it okay with just kim chasamav? You should still have to say by one shliach to say b'fanei nechtav. Says Gemara, you're right. But we're talking about kishanisas. We're talking about where she already got married. And as Rashi explains, because of this gezeira, we're not going to have her removed from the husband that she's married to. So that's why she's going to be able to be married without b'fanei nechtav. But you're right, if she wasn't married yet, then we would require b'fanei nechtav because of shemei yachzor b'kolkulai. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, read the words of the brisa. It doesn't fit. The brisa feared ice. The brisa followed through and said, heavy. This tells us we didn't require the statement of b'fanei nechtav lahachmala as a stringency to say like even when there's kiyum you can require it. It's only to be lenient on her that when there's no two witnesses, okay, it's enough with one shliach bring it. Says the Gemara, that's not the reason. The reason why you're not requiring b'fanei nechtav is mishum denisisu, because she's married. If she wasn't married, we would not allow her to get married, even though it's already been mekoyim b'chasamav. That's a stringency. Because we would require b'fanei nechtav according to Rabbah. So the words of the brisa are not correct the way you're saying how it would have to work out according to Rabbah. So that says the Gemara. The truth is no, like we answered, she's married, and that's why we don't remove her. And this is what the brisa is saying. And maybe you would say, wait a second, let's be stringent on her. And actually, even with kim chasamav, we would have to make her get removed from her husband that she got married to. And that's what the bride is saying heavy. No, we did not require to be stringent. Meaning, what's the lahachmala is changing according to the Havmin Maskanas Gemara. Meaning, we're not going to be machmana to make her leave the marriage that she got married already. To say that we'll be stringent and make her leave because no b'fanei nechtav. No, we're going to be lenient her. Meaning, from the beginning, that we're not going to require the witnesses. So as we continue Talmud Beis, which actually there's different girsayis if this is a continuation or it's like a iboyis ema, but our girsa is that it's one pshat the Gemara is saying is time amai. What's the reason why the Rabbanan said that you have to say b'fanei nechtav is dima asibal ma'ara pasle? Maybe the husband's going to come along and contest and invalidate it. So therefore, yeah, if she's not married yet, we're going to say you can't get married because a husband might contest it. But hashta, now that she's already married, why would I make her get divorced? But Baal Loikam Ara, the husband didn't even contest it yet. And now Nakim and Ara, we're going to go and contest it and say, oh, you didn't say b'fanei nechtav. The whole point is because of a preemptive strike. And now you're going to go and destroy her marriage because Chris didn't say it. The whole point, we're not really concerned. We're just concerned for him coming and contesting. If he didn't do it, we're going to make her get divorced. And therefore, that's why it's not difficult on Rabbah that, yeah, of course we require b'fanei nechtav. Even la'achar shalom, because gzeira shem yachzor b'kolkulai. But this that we're saying she's married is, the price is saying, okay, she's married already. Well, we're not going to go ahead and make her get divorced because you didn't say b'fanei nechtav, because we're not really concerned for lishma. It's really, really only concerned of the husband contesting this halacha of lishma. Now the Gemara continues with this machlekes Rabba and Rava, and the Gemara wants to tell us that earlier Amiram had the same machlekes Rabba and Rava already earlier. As the Gemara says, seemingly beplukted Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Shloimy Levi. Not seemingly, it's clear that the same machlekes was said between Rabbi and Rava earlier between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Shloimy Levi. Chadam one says Lefishay Mekin Lishma. The reason why he said b'fanei nechtav is because we need to make sure that it was written Lishma. The other one says Lefishay Einim Mitzvah Mekan because we don't have witnesses. Okay, so we'll have the shliach that will verify and authenticate the document. And that says the Gemara Testain. I could bring a raya. The Rabbi Shloimy Levi who the Amad that must have been Rabbi Shloimy Levi, that he's the one who said that the reason is Lefishay Mekin Lishma. That's why you say b'fanei nechtav. What's the raya? Because the Gemara brings a story. The Shimon bar Abba Aisi Gita, he brought a get from Medina Siyam, L'kamei Rabbi Shloimy Levi, in front of Rabbi Shloimy Levi in Eretz Yisrael. V'amalei said to him, Tzrichna l'meim b'fanei nechtav. My Lord, the shliach asked, do I have to say b'fanei nechtav or not? Amalei said to him, Loi tzrichas. You don't have to say it. Because Lo Yamr didn't say this halacha, Ella b'deiros harishayim, only in the earlier generations, meaning Shem Bekin Lishma. In those days, they weren't proficient in halacha Lishma. So the Chacham said, you have to say B'fan Nechtav to verify that it was written Lishma. But the later generations, Bekin Lishma, like we said, there's Acha Shalamdu, Shem Gilad, and we already know the halacha already. Then lie. There's no need to say B'fan Nechtav anymore. Says Yimach, this time, it's a proof that must be Shimon Levi is the one who held that the reason is because of Bekin Lishma. Says Yimach, what? V'tizbera? Is that logical? Which Taisa says from Rashi not to be gyrus the word logical, but the Gemara's question is, if you have the gears, is it really logical this that you're saying that what? That this Reb Shimon bar Abba came and brought the get by himself in front of Shimon Levi, and he didn't require him to say b'fani nechtav? But for Rabba islay de Rava, but Rabba holds like Rava, and you need it for kiyum. So how could you say one person without b'fani nechtav would be able to bring the get? But you have to be mekayim the get. Even Rabba agrees to Rabba. So even if they know the halacha of Lishma, how does it help for Kiyum Shtaras? But we say, we say that even Rabba is concerned that things, even though they learned the halacha already, might go back to the old ways that they don't know. So even for the halacha of Lishma, you should require B'fani Nechtav. And what's he letting him off the hook without saying B'fani Nechtav? So how does this make sense? So rather says the Gemara, Shimon bar Abba, there actually was someone else there with him. Oh, we had said when two people bring a get, is a milsud l'shchicha, a milsud l'shchicha legazel b'rabbanon for shemayach zevakakuloi. And when you have two people, for Rabba, that also takes care of it because you have kiyum shtachas with the two people. I bought the chashav. So then why didn't they mention this other person? Because of the honor of Reb Shimon that the Rebbe, you don't say this other person came with the Rebbe. You don't, when the papers put out, Chaim Shtinkovitz came with the bells of the Rebbe. They don't mention that. He comes with 30, 50, 700 people. You don't mention the Rebbe, Reb Shimon. So they didn't mention, but there were two people, and therefore that's why. But what you do see at least that Reb Shimon Levi said is Acha Shalamdu. According to Rebbe, there's no point of saying if you hold the reason is because Eidim Tumekam, you're not going to mention Acha Shalamdu. You're right. You don't have the problem because there was someone else with him. But you see, Shimon Levi is the one who held like Rabbah. Now, relating back to this halacha, Itmar, the Gemara taught the following machlekes, which we mentioned already on Daf Gimel. B'fnei kama noisnla. In front of how many people does the shliach give this get to the woman? So it's a machlekes. One says in front of two people. One says in front of three people. Says the Gemara, I can bring you a proof. Rabbi Yechanan is the one that says that you give it in front of two people. Why? Because the Rav bar Rav Chizda Aisi Gitel come in Rabbi Yechanan. Another story. Rav bar Rav Chizda brought the get in front of Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan said to him, Zil havla ba'apitrei. Give it in front of two people. And ve'emelu b'fani nechtav v'nechtav and say b'fani nechtav v'nechtav. It's time. So you see clearly Rabbi Yechanan is the one who holds that you put it in front of two people. Fine. So it says the Gemara, let's say what is their machlekes dependent on is the following principle. The one who says you put in front of two people holds the reason why you have to say this statement is because they were not sure if they knew the halacha lishma. So therefore it's enough in front of two people, meaning all you need is that those two people should be witnesses that the shliach said b'fani nechtav, and if the husband comes to contest, we're not going to pay attention because we have two witnesses to verify that the shliach already validated, meaning told us that it was done lishma. But a madam of an one that says it has to be given in front of three people because he holds because you don't have witnesses to verify the document. Oh, since that's for kiyum, then it has to be in front of three people. Because the Gemara says in Ksubas in the second period of Chavav and Beis, the kiyum shtaris has to be with three people. So if it's for kiyum shtaris, so then it has to be in front of three. So seemingly that's machlekes between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Chanina. The problem is Gemara of a Tizbera. Is it logical to say that this is their machlekes? But we had mentioned the previous Gemara that Rabbi Shloimy Levi Amar, we said that he, with his machlekes Rabbi Yechanan, we proved that he was the one Amar that it says Lefishem Bekin Lishma. Like we brought a story that the inference is Rabbi Yechanan who disagreed with Rabbi Shloimy Levi. We didn't know who says what, but we proved that Rabbi Shloimy Levi is the one that says because of Lishma. And Rabbi Yechanan is the one that Amar Lefishem Bekin Lishma, obviously, because he's the disputant. Wait a second. But how could then Rabbi Yochanan be the one who says, and we just proved from his story, Rabbi Yochanan says, you give it in front of two people. Wait a second. You told me that the machlokes is 2 or 3 is machlokes lishma or edim tzun l'kaimai. If Rabbi Yochanan is the one who holds that the reason is because of edim tzun l'kaimai, how could he be the one that says that you give it in front of 2 when you're telling me the halacha of the one who says 2 is the one of lishma? But he doesn't hold the one of lishma. He's required 3. Void Morva says the Gemara. Another question is, but harabba, even according to the one that holds that because they're not bekin lishma, it's still not enough in front of 2, even according to him. Because Islay de Rava, we said Rabba holds up Rava's concern that you have to be Mekayimid. So according to everyone should require 3 because Kim Shtagos requires 3 like a Bezdin. So how do we understand the machlekes of 2 or 3? So Ella rather says the Gemara, you're right. The Kuli Alma.
The question that Yochanan not the same machlokes as Rava.
What do you mean?
As Rava and Rava. The Gemara asks, Rava is like the Rava. So Rava also has a concern with Rava that he has to be kind of
Right, because we brought rayas. It's not a din in Rabba and Rabba. We brought rayas that Rabba had to concede and said, yeah, you see that there's halacha that you have to be mekayim it.
what we're trying to do here is trying to
Ask.
this machlokes is the same as Rava and Rava.
Well, that was the previous Gemara.
Because Rava also
That was the previous Gemara. Meaning the previous Gemara on the top of the Amid.
The question that the oil Rava is Rava is no, it's not the same machlokes. That Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yochanan.
Well, in the Chanami, that's what the Gemara is. The Gemara wanted to say. You're right. The Gemara is going to say it's not, but the Gemara is assuming that the machlokes in front of how many people you have to give it 2 or 3 is that same machlokes. That's what the Gemara was assuming because in front of 2 makes sense if you hold lishma because all you have to do is witnesses that he said it was lishma, and if you hold ein edim tzum, oh, you require in front of 3 because kimer stars requires 3. That's what the Gemara is assuming. The Gemara is asking, wait a second. If you're making that assumption, we have 2 questions. One, Rabbi Yochanan doesn't work out, and also, how could you ever put in front of 2, even if you hold the reason is lishma, but you also hold the reason of ein edim tzum l'kaimai? Everyone holds because we brought rayas that you're concerned for the kim shtaris. So even if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, whoever you want to call him, Rabbi, whatever you want to call him, you have to be concerned for also the halacha of ein edim tzum l'kaimai. Exactly, that's what the Gemara is saying. A different pshat. That's not the machlekes of lishma of ein edim tzum l'kaimai. Ela rather the kuliyam everyone holds being edim tzum l'kaimai. Like we said, even if you hold like Rabba of lishma, he also agrees to Rava. Yeah, you need 3 people. So wait a second. So what's the machlekes of in front of 2 or 3? Says the Gemara the following lamdas. In other words, like Rashi explains, do we say that just like we know that a shliach, an agent, could become a witness, do we also say that now the witness could become a judge? That's the machlekes. So the Gemara explains. Except the one that says you only have to give it in front of 2 people, he holds that just like shliach nasa aid, that the agent can become a witness. So too ve'ed nasa dain. The witness can now become the judge. So therefore, look, this shliach testifies and now joins the judge, joins the court. And therefore there's 3 people. So good, we'll have kim shtachis. But Aman Dam, if they gimel, except the one that holds that you have to give in front of 3 people, he holds that no, even though shliach nasa aid, even though the agent can become a witness, but ve'ein aid nasa dain, but the witness cannot become a judge. And therefore you'll have to give it in front of 3 people. But everyone agrees of because of ein edim tzum l'kaimai. Only question is, could he join and be that 3rd judge? Says Gemara, wait a second, but we know regarding rabbinic law, the eid nasa dain. We know that a witness can become a judge. For example, by the validation of documents, the Gemara says in Ksubas over there, that 3 people that are sitting to validate a document, if it happens that 2 of them recognize the signatures and one of them doesn't, so we could say they could testify in front of him and then they could all become judges. So we asked, what do you mean? Is that to say eid nasa dain? How do those two judges who recognize testify in front of him and then become the judges? So the Gemara answers and says, yes. When did we say that it ain't eid nasa dain? That's by, let's say, testifying regarding the new moon, which is a biblical halacha. That maybe you'll say ain't eid nasa dain. But regarding rabbinic law of kim stars, yeah, everyone agrees eid nasa dain. So if that's the case, so everyone should agree it should be enough in front of 2 people. Why are we requiring in front of 3? Even according to the one that holds ain't eid nasa dain, that's only by biblical law. Rabbinic law, everyone agrees eid nasa dain. So why wouldn't it be enough in front of 2 people? Seller rather says, what the disputers are going the following idea. The Marsav Reb Chanina holds, if you're going to validate in front of 2 people. The problem is even the ishik sheikh levis aged, since as the Mishnah tells us, as we mentioned previously, that a woman is valid to bring her own get. At times, what will happen is that the woman's going to bring it, and we're going to rely on her to validate the bringing in front of two people. The problem is a woman's not fit to join with them because she cannot be a judge. So although generally you're right, a regular guy bringing it could join because shlich nasa ein nasa dan regarding rabbinic law, but if the woman brings it, you're running into a problem. Which Taisa says the same thing you could say, not only the woman, it could also be relatives. You also run into the same problem. Even though a relative could bring it, but he cannot become a judge. But v'idach Rabbi Yechon held that no, isha made the yad b'lei samachala. Everyone knows that the woman cannot be a judge. You're not going to run into the problem over there, and you'll have three. But when the regular person comes along, you could have two, and that's where the machlekes depends on. Now it says the Gemara Tani Kavasid Rabbi Yechon, the Brisa says like Rabbi Yechon that you only have to bring it in front of two, because the Brisa says Hamei get. If someone brings a get in Medina from overseas in the sun, and he gives it to Ablo Amalo b'fanei nachman, and he didn't say b'fanei nachman. So what's the halacha? So the first Tana says Yoitzi. Whoever had married her through this get has to divorce her. Vavlad Mams and the child, if they had a child is a bastard. That's the Remeir, because she's an Eisha Sish. It was not a valid get at all. The sages say no, enough on Mams. The child's not a Mams. She had a get because you didn't say b'fanei nachman. It's not going to make it into a pasal get. So Ketzad Yasa, what should you do? Which Taisa explains this should you do is different according to the two different Tanoim. But yet Lena Hemena. The shlich should take it back from her, and then he should give it back to her b'fanei Hashem in front of the two, which Taisa also proves from here that you see b'fanei nachtav is a din in the nesinas haget. You can't just say b'fanei nachtav when the woman has it already. It has to be b'shas ma'isa, and he says, we know that a shlich can hand it over to another shlich, and it's not at the time of the nesinas haget, but it's when he's giving it out. Very lum the shishtikl, but b'shas the nesinas haget is when you have to say it. But take it back and then give it and say it in front of two people. And say in front of me, in front of me, sign. No, so we're talking about that before she had the baby. It would technically be even after. Really, the truth is, I mean, Taisa discusses that it's talking about if, let's say, if she's already married. Meaning, like Taisa said, for the child, there's nothing to do. But we're saying for her marriage, she could get divorced and get remarried. To this individual by saying b'fanei nachtam, because really it's really a good get. And actually the Gemara parenthetically asks Remeir what, because you didn't say b'fanei nachtam yitzi v'avlad mamzer, you have to get divorced and the child is a mamzer, but it's a kosher get. It was written in front of him. He just didn't say it. That makes the child into a mamzer. Says the Gemara, yes, that is the case. Why? Because Remeir goes according to his reason. That Rav Nuna says Mishmei de'ula. Meir said, whoever changes from the text that the sages said regarding the laws of Gitin, you have to get divorced. V'avlad mamzer, and the child is going to be considered as a mamzer. It's like a psul in the get alain, even though it's a kosher get. If you didn't say, Taisa discusses that regarding different cases, that if it's really considered mamash a din in the get, it's a psul like in the get, and it's like you didn't have a kosher get, and the child's going to be a mamzer. Right, so it's not according to Rabbi Meir, not. According to Rabbi Meir, Taisa says that it's like, all the things like when you're in an Asian position, you got married to someone you're not allowed to, you have to get out from the bow and the boil, and you're done. Your goose is cooked. What? No, because she was mezana. It's like yitzim in a bow in a boil. She's done. She's.
Contemporary day, reforming conservative people that do Gitin, they couldn't know these halachas, and all the children born post.
Yeah.
They're problematic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it might not be because their marriage was also not. They actually say it's better that they do reform conservative, whatever. That's contemporary questions, but because they're not even married, so then you don't have the problem about Gitin because they didn't have kedushin. Now the Gemara continues regarding the shliach of the get, regarding this halacha of lishma. So bar hedya boy lasui giti. He wanted to bring a get. So also came into Rabbi Achi. He came in from the Rabbi Achi, who in that city where they were writing it, they have a Mamuna Giti. Rabbi Achi was in charge of the Gitin because the Gemara Kedushin Avav tells us that whoever doesn't know very well the laws of Gitin and Kedushin, he shouldn't be involved with it. So they would appoint a great person to give rulings on the halachas of Gitin and Kedushin. So Amalei said to him, You have to be standing there for every letter written of this get, because again, he has to say b'fanei nacht, and he has to verify to make sure every single letter. Now, also came to Rabbi Ravasi, but it came from the Rabbi Ravasi, and they said, no, loy tzrichas. You don't have to stand there for every single letter, only one line. And if you're going to say, I'll be stringent, I want to be machmer. No, if you're going to do that, you're going to stand over every single letter. You're going to spread rumors regarding earlier Gitin. You don't have to be there for every single letter that's written. And so to Rabbi Babachana, Aisi Gita, he brought a get. Palga Ichtav Kamei, half was written in front of him. Palga Lo Ichtav Kamei, and the other half was not written in front of him. Also, Kamei Derbalaza, Amallah, he said to him, it's no problem. Even if only one line was written Lishma, which Shais explains, not that only one line has to be written Lishma, means even if you only saw one letter being written Lishma, because then Tais says we presume that it was ended Lishma, Shumei Netach. You don't have to see the rest. It's enough. You could say, but when only seeing one line, you don't have to be there standing over, making sure you see every single letter that was done. And Rav Ashi says even a bigger chiddush, as Gitin Daf Vavam at Aleph, he says, Afila kan kulmasa b'kan megilta. Two interpretations of Rashi. Either it's like when they're preparing the quill or the parchment, they're doing it lishma, when they're cutting it and they're smoothing it. Or Rashi likes the pshat that he hears the sound of the quill when they're writing, and the sound of the parchment is heard like kan. Some say kal kulmasa. It's not really kan. It's not really the quill, but it's really the voice of the parchment. But there's me. When he hears the writing, that's also okay. That's enough. Which Tais says, why is that different in the case of a blind person, which is possible because he didn't see. Tais says it's different. It doesn't explain why, because there it's impossible. He can't say b'fanei nachta. Here, he could say. Telling us Rav Ashi, we learned the Bryce like Rav Ashi that says this halacha that you don't even have to see anything; you could just hear it. Where do we see this? The following Bryce says that maybe get from Medina Siyam. If someone brings a get from overseas, so we say afilu b'bayis, even if the shliach was in the house, the Sefer Bali, the scribe was in the upper story in the attic, or let's say hu Bali, he was in the upper story. The Sefer was on the first floor. Or even if he was coming and going the whole day, kasha, it's kasha. So you see that you don't have to see him at all. As long as you hear him writing the get, it's enough to say b'fanei nachta. Says the Gemara, wait a second. Hu b'bayis of Sefer Ba'aliyah, I mean, this is what the Gemara is proving now. If he's in the first floor and the Sefer is in the second floor, like Chaz didn't see him, rather obviously, obviously he heard him doing it, and that's enough, like Rav Ashi said, that's the proof. Now, once we brought in this teaching, the Gemara asks, Amamar, you said in the Brisa, Afila nichnas v'yitze kolim kukuli, even if the guy is what's called nichnas v'yitze, he's coming in and out the whole day, he said, kasha is going to be kasha. So the Gemara, wait, man, who's coming and going the whole day? If the agent, what does that mean? If he's on the first floor and the Sefer is in the second story, he doesn't even see him at all. Amar kasha, it's kasha. Nichnas v'yitze mebayah, you have to say if it's coming and going. So Taisa says, which you might be thinking, said no, maybe nichnas v'yitze means to say he wasn't even on the first floor the whole day. He was just coming and going. Taisa says no. The word nichnas sounds like he came in and out of where the Sefer was. So I wouldn't need to say that he came and went to like see what he's doing, checking on what he's doing, because you don't have to go in the first place. So rather says the Gemara Ela Sefer. We're talking about even if the Sefer was coming and going the whole day. Says the Gemara Pshita, what shayches? Shem the nichnas v'yitze nefsalim, because the scribe was coming and going, we should invalidate. Why does that make a difference? Says the Gemara, yeah, interesting answer. Late tzricha, no, we needed. We're talking about with the nafak. The scribe went out l'shuka to the marketplace where there's many people over there. V'asa, and he came back, so he's coming and going the whole day. Ma'odetema, what would you say? In the shachrina ashkecha, he encountered someone else in the street, in the marketplace, who his name is the same name as this husband. V'amalei, and he told him to write him a get, and maybe therefore he's not writing it l'shma because he's writing it thinking, hey, maybe this other guy, he's a wealthy guy, maybe he'll pay me more for the get. Maybe I'll give it to him because he has the same name. It's the same Yaakov and Leah, very common names, and maybe I'll give it to him. That's the chiddush that was saying that no, that even if he's nichnas v'yitze kolim kukul, we're not concerned that it was done l'shma. But one thing we see like Rav Ashi is that with l'halcha l'shma, all you need to do, you don't have to actually see it. It's enough to even just hear it. Thank you to any time for hosting us.